Will the House please come to order and members kindly take their seats? Good morning. The devotional today will be led by Representative Phil Pouch of Hinesburg.
My son Ezra was killed 1 year ago, protecting his girlfriend during a domestic violence incident. As we were gathering his things in his apartment, we discovered a poem by Mary Oliver, prominently displayed in his room. This poem clearly reflects his personality and life beliefs. I hope it resonates with all of us as we live our daily lives. Don't hesitate. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give into it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind. And much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back that sometimes something happens better than all the riches and power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not meant to be a crumb.
Members, will you please rise as pages Cecilia Hulling of Thetford and Mary Rogerson of Cabot lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members, we have 30 House bills for introduction today. With that, member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend rules to introduce bills by number only?
Sure. I make a motion to suspend rules in order to introduce bills by number only.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended rules to introduce bills by number only. Please listen to the first reading of bills by number only.
H227.
To Human Services.
H228.
To Healthcare.
H229.
To Agriculture, Food Resiliency, and Forestry.
H230.
To Environment.
H231.
To Environment.
H232.
To Government Operations and Military Affairs.
H233.
To Government Operations and Military Affairs.
H234.
To General and Housing.
H235.
To Commerce and Economic Development.
H236.
To Environment.
H237.
To Healthcare.
H238.
To Environment.
H239.
To Government Operations and Military Affairs.
H240.
To Government Operations and Military Affairs.
H241.
To Government Operations and Military Affairs.
H242.
To General and Housing.
H243.
To Commerce and Economic Development.
H244.
To Government Operations and Military Affairs.
H245.
To Healthcare.
H246.
To Education.
H247.
To Education.
H248.
To Human Services.
H249.
To Ways and Means.
H250.
To Human Services.
H251.
To Judiciary.
H252.
To Corrections and Institutions.
H253.
To General and Housing.
H254.
To Judiciary.
H255.
To Judiciary.
And H256.
To General and Housing. Members, we have received Request to read a House concurrent resolution that the House and Senate adopted pursuant to the consent calendar. HCR 11 is a House concurrent resolution in memory of the extraordinary Bennington K-9 police officer Gracie. Please listen to the reading of the resolution.
Whereas canine police officers serve a unique and essential law enforcement role, and this fact has been especially reflected in the operations of the Bennington Police Department, where Canine Gracie was a star of much renown, serving in a program that Bennington Police Chief Paul J. Doucette Jr. and Lieutenant Camilo A. Grande established. And whereas the achievements of this dedicated police officer were undeniably impressive, as enumerated in her over 500 deployments and location of more than 70 persons, and she mightily contributed to the recovery of drugs and currency valued in excess of $1.6 million. And whereas her service on behalf of the Bennington citizenry was widely respected, and this stalwart police officer was a welcomed visitor at local schools and was present at many community events. And whereas her sudden death on Thanksgiving Day, November 28th, 2024, was shocked and saddened Benningtonians. And whereas her memorial service with more than 500 persons in attendance served as a dignified and emotional farewell featuring the participation of many fans and admirers, a choral musical performance, the presentation of a tribute American flag to Gracie's human caretaker, Officer Robert Murawski, and concluded with a much befitting 21-gun salute. And whereas a new canine training yard to be constructed in Bennington will be dedicated in Canine Gracie's honor. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that the General Assembly extends its condolences to the Bennington Police Department and the many admirers of Canine Gracie on the death of this outstanding police officer. And be it further resolved that the Secretary of State be directed to send a copy of this resolution to the Bennington Police Department, Police Chief Paul J. Doucette Jr., Lieutenant Camilo A. Grande, and Officer Robert Murawski.
Are there any announcements? Member from Bennington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning. We just heard the reading of House Concurrent Resolution 11 in memory and in honor of Bennington K-9 Police Officer Gracie, who suddenly passed away on Thanksgiving Day 2024. K-9 Gracie's many years of outstanding, dedicated service to Bennington and our surrounding region, alongside her fellow police partner, handler, best friend, and dad, Officer Robert Murawski, were a team like no other. Their successful police work is well documented and most impressive. In a different light from their more serious police work, it was always a pleasure to see Gracie and Officer Murawski in our community, whether it be at a school, a nursing home, the Vermont Veterans Home, our adult daycare, or a Bennington community event. This amazing team brought joy and smiles to those of all ages. Today, as we honor and remember K-9 Gracie, I wish to thank her handler and partner, Officer Robert Murawski, Police Chief Paul Doucette, and our Bennington Police Department and their families for their dedicated service and the sacrifice to our community and region every single day. With us today is K-9 Gracie's handler and partner, Officer Robert Murawski, and his wife, Abby Dickey, Bennington Police Chief Paul Doucette, Lieutenant Steve Coate of the Vermont State Police from Shasberry, and Michael Albans from the Bennington Banner. Others had planned to attend, but unfortunately, due to the weather conditions, they could not. We know they are here in spirit with all of us today. Madam Speaker, please join me in extending a warm welcome to our guests today. They are seated in the back of the gallery, and we are honored that they're here today. Thank you.
Will the guest of the member from Bennington please rise and be recognized? Member from Cambridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and the Rural Caucus will be meeting from 8 to 8:45 in room 10 and on Zoom. We'll be hearing about the current use program and the Act 250 Land Use Review Board. Wednesday evening, the caucus will be hosting a public forum to listen to the concerns of rural Vermonters. This will be taking place from 5:30 to 7 p.m. in room 10 and on Zoom. All are welcome to both meetings.
Member from Manchester.
Madam Speaker, we are joined at the State House today by more than 50 Vermonters from communities across the Green Mountain State. They are members of Third Act, a national nonprofit group with more than 70,000 members over the age of 60 who want to change the world for the better. The group in the chamber today speaks for the Vermont chapter, 700 members and counting, who are working to protect our planet from climate change and to safeguard our democracy. They are joined by UVM students in a display of generational unity. Please join me in welcoming these leaders of all ages to the People's House.
Will the guest of the member from Manchester please rise and be recognized? Member from Linden.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is my honor today to ask us all to welcome visitors we have from the Vermont Independent Schools Association. They will be in the card room most of the day, and I would encourage everyone to stop by and have a chat. I think it's very important, especially for those who do not have independent schools in their regions, to stop and visit with them, find out about their activities, and how the independent schools fit within our total educational landscape. They are seated in the balcony.
Will the guest of the member from Linden please rise and be recognized? Member from Putney.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Living 2 hours away, it's not often I get visitors here. And today I have some very special visitors with some family visiting. And I'd like to introduce to the body my daughter Grace, my granddaughter Lillian, and my wife Amelia.
Will the family of the member from Putney please rise and be recognized? Member from Fairfax.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, I'm asking the body to help me welcome a junior from CVU, so a little outside of my region, but was one of the first applicants I got for my Legislator of the Day program. Quinlan Shea is very interested in democracy and politics and has asked some of the best questions that I don't necessarily have the answers for. So if you see him today and he asks you a question, hopefully you have better answers than me.
Will the guest of the member from Fairfax please rise and be recognized? Member from Montpelier.
Madam Speaker, the Working Vermonters Caucus will be held at noon tomorrow in room 10 in the State House. We're very excited. Everybody looked like they were in that movie Dr. Zhivago last week walking over the pavilion. So it's going to be right here in the building. Come for the pizza and stay for the labor.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, orders of the day. Members, we will begin with House Bill 98, which is an act relating to confirmatory adoptions. Member from South Burlington.
Madam Speaker, I move that we postpone action on H98, an act relating to confirmatory adoptions, one legislative day.
The member from South Burlington moves that we postpone action on House Bill 98 for one legislative day. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have postponed action on House Bill 98 for one legislative day. Next is House Bill 13, which is an act relating to Medicaid payment rates for home and community-based service providers and designated and specialized service agencies. The bill is referred to the Committee on Human Services, which recommends that the bill be amended as printed in today's calendar. The member from Wolcott, Representative Noyes, will speak for the committee. And carrying an appropriation, the bill was then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that the bill ought to pass when amended, as recommended by the Committee on Human Services. The member from Morristown, Representative Iacovone, will speak for that committee. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H13, an act relating to Medicaid payment rates for home and community-based service providers and designated and specialized service agencies.
Member from Wolcott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. H13 requires the Secretary of Human Services to determine reasonable and adequate rates for home and community-based providers, designated agencies, and specialized service agencies. In essence, a rate study to determine what it costs to provide Medicaid services and supports to older Vermonters and individuals with disabilities, our most vulnerable. Let me back up. Home and community-based service providers are home health agencies, residential care, enhanced residential care, adult day providers, assisted community care services. These are the agencies to provide in-home, non-institutionalized care up to nursing home level. These services allow Medicaid-eligible people to age in their homes and communities, also known as Choices for Care. H13 also asks the Agency of Human Services to determine how much designated agencies and specialized service agencies need to provide mental health services and supports to individuals with developmental, intellectual disabilities, and brain injuries. There are 11 designated agencies in Vermont, each serving a specific geographical region. These agencies provide mental health services and supports for individuals, including Vermonters with developmental disabilities. Examples include Lamoille County Mental Health, Rutland Mental Health Services, and the Howard Center. Vermont has 7 specialized service agencies that provide statewide supports for individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities and mental health services. These agencies offer personalized services, including individualized care, shared and independent living support, respites, and crisis interventions. Examples include Green Mountain Support Services, Champlain Community Services, and Family First of Southern Vermont. H13 acknowledges that there isn't enough revenue to fully fund these providers each year. Providers. Each year we must make strategic, informed decisions about resource allocation. To do this effectively, we need clear understanding of service delivery costs. For example, in 2023, a rate study found that assistive community care services were underfunded by 79%, causing many providers to go out of business. While other needs were identified, the study helped prioritize limited funds to prevent further loss of these essential services. Your Human Service Committee heard from numerous agencies and individuals about unmet needs resulting from level funding, rising costs due to federal requirements, workforce shortages, and inflationary pressures. Individuals and families in need of services reported not being able to receive them due to staffing shortages. For example, a report from Developmental Disabilities Housing Initiative found that 18% of individuals approved for services received no support. Additionally, the Home Health Agency in Franklin County closed. 5 adult day providers shut down and have not reopened due to unsustainable reimbursement rates. Since 2020, Vermont has seen a net loss of 321 residential care home beds and 23 facilities closing. Only five new ones opened. Older Vermonters eligible for Choices for Care programs who are living in hotels are unable to access sustainable housing. We need to develop a path to address this inadequate funding. In the budget adjustment, this body appropriated $24.5 million to skilled nursing facilities to cover increased utilization and another 21 for emergency financial relief. Nursing homes provide an important service to Vermonters in need of the highest level of care. They are dealing with inflation, workforce shortages, and are the most expensive system of care. H13 will give us the information to support human community-based providers and take some of the burden off our skilled nursing care, reducing costs. H13 also asked the Secretary of Human Services to establish a process to provide extraordinary financial relief to providers who are in imminent risk of closure. Let me walk through the bill highlights. Let me walk through some of the highlights of the bill that can be found on page 87 of today's calendar. Section 1 provides definition of home and community-based service providers, where the funding comes from, and who is eligible to receive these services. Section 2 directs the Secretary of Human Services to determine reasonable and adequate reimbursement rates to achieve the required outcomes. These rates must account for state and federal mandates, the cost of goods and services, inflation, and labor market pressures. The Secretary may also consider geographic differences in wages, benefits, and housing costs. The methodology must also include a schedule for reviewing rates at least once every 5 years, a process for determining an annual inflationary rate adjustments, and a system to support providers whose reimbursement rates are negatively impacted by client absences. Additionally, the Secretary must establish a process for providing an imminent risk of closure to seek emergency financial relief, aligning them with nursing homes to ensure continued care for Vermont's most vulnerable population. Section 3 requires the same methodology and the same timeframe for determining rates for designated and specialized service agencies, as I laid out in Section 2. Section 4 is the report back to the legislature, which is due on January 15th, on rates and where the Agency of Human Services is in the process of establishing the schedule for performing the rate reviews. Section 5 states the bill shall take effect on passage. Our vote in committee was 11-0-0. Understanding the reasonable and adequate rates associated with providing these services does not require the agency to increase the rates. It helps this body make informed decisions on how best to allocate limited funds while protecting and providing care to our most vulnerable. I have a copy of the fiscal note stating that there is no fiscal impact on my desk, should anyone like to take a look at it. The committee heard from the following witnesses: Outreach Director, Green Mountain Self Advocates; Administrative Director, Green Mountain Self Advocates; Parent Development Disabilities Housing Initiative; a participant, Care Partners, Adult Day Centers; a parent of Champlain Community Services; a parent, Developmental Disabilities Housing Initiative; the Commissioner of the Department of Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living; the Director of Managed Care Operations, Department of Health Access; Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs, Department of Health Access; Medicaid Director at the Agency of Human Services, President of the Vermont Association of Adult Day Services, Executive Director of Care Partner Adult Day Centers, Executive Director of Washington County Mental Health Services, CFO of the Washington County Mental Health Services, CFO of the Howard Center, Executive Director of Northeast Kingdom Services, Executive Director of Upper Valley Services, Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives, Cathedral Square, Executive Director, Vermont Association of Area Agencies on Aging, Government Affairs and Communication Director, Vermont Care Partners, Executive Director of Vermont Health Care Association, Executive Director of the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council, Health Equity and Advisory Commission, Executive Director of VNAs of Vermont, State Long-Term Care Ombudsman, Vermont Legal Aid, Staff Attorney with the Vermont Legal Aid Law Project, Principal Financial Analyst, Joint Fiscal Office, and the Deputy Chief Counsel, Office of Legislative Counsel. We ask for your support.
And now speaking for the Committee on Appropriations, member from Morristown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For those who might be following today in the House, in the calendar, on page 89, section 2, letter E, is language which our committee was particularly interested in. It states that a report will come to us indicating what the cost is for reasonable and adequate rates. Your Committee on Appropriations strongly supports H13. It will give us the critical information needed to move forward to help the vulnerable that the member from Wolcott speaks of so well. The committee voted in favor of this bill on a vote of 10-0-1 and asked for your support. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended the bill. Now the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and third reading is ordered. Members, the final bill on our action calendar today is House Bill 44, which is an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to the laws governing impaired driving. The bill is referred to the Committee on Judiciary, which recommends that the bill be amended as printed in today's calendar. The member from Brattleboro, Representative Goodnow, will speak for the committee. And carrying an appropriation, the bill was then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that the report of the Committee on Judiciary be amended as printed in today's calendar. The member from Underhill, Representative Squirrel, will speak for that committee. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H44, an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to the laws governing impaired driving.
Member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, before the chamber is the House Judiciary Committee's strike all amendment to H44 entitled An Act Relating to Miscellaneous Amendments to the Laws Governing Impaired Driving. This bill proposes to make a variety of changes to the impaired driving laws, including technical corrections, closing loopholes to ensure that the Department of Motor Vehicles is notified of license suspensions, and creating proportionate accountability for non-compliance to warrant-based blood draws, among others. Madam Speaker, this bill is broken down into 6 sections, and I will discuss each of them briefly. Beginning with Section 1, found on page 91 of today's calendar, this section amends 4 VSA 33A concerning the jurisdiction of the Family Division of the Superior Court. Specifically, this section makes technical corrections. It strikes the term juvenile and adds reference to 33 VSA Chapter 52A, the Youthful Offender Chapter, to proceedings within the jurisdiction of the Family Court. These technical changes are important because they reflect the realities of the Family Division to hear delinquency cases involving juveniles and youthful offender cases related to DUI violations. The term juvenile is not a precise legal term, as it addresses those in delinquency proceedings and not youthful offenders. Additionally, 4 VSA 33B is amended to also make technical changes by clarifying terms, ensuring that a felony as well as misdemeanor motor vehicle offenses can be heard in the Family Division, and to ensure that the Family Division Court decisions are reported to the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles. Section 2 is really the meat of the bill, Madam Speaker. This section amends various parts of 23 VSA Chapter 13, Subchapter 13. This first amendment is the addition of serious bodily injury to the definition section of the subchapter. As you will see later in the bill, this is a cleanup of the various cross-references to the term in 23 VSA 2010. Moving to the amendments to 23 VSA 1201, that can be found on page 93 of today's calendar. A new subsection, subsection J, is added, mandating compliance with the collection of an evidentiary blood sample issued through a warrant. Thus, a refusal to submit to the collection of the blood sample could result in a charge of criminal refusal to an evidentiary test. A proposed amendment to the subsection F of section 1201 provides that a person cannot be convicted of a DUI violation and a criminal refusal. The prosecutor is going to have to choose one or the other. With these proposed changes, it is important to understand the situations in which a police officer can obtain a blood sample in the DUI context here in the Green Mountain State. Under our implied consent law, 23 VSA 1202, a person has provided implied consent to a blood test if 1, breath testing equipment is not available at the time of arrest, 2, the person cannot give a sufficient breath sample to the breath testing equipment, or 3, when the police officer has reasonable grounds to believe that the suspect is under the influence of a drug or other than alcohol. However, in all of these circumstances, 1, 2, and 3, the police officer must obtain a warrant due to the intrusive nature of a blood draw. That warrant requirement is embodied in 1202 subsection F of the chapter. To ensure a person's understanding of the consequences, DUI suspects are informed by a police officer of certain statutory information under 1202 D6. That can be found on page 96 of today's calendar. H44 further amends this portion of the law to ensure that a DUI suspect is aware that they could be charged with a criminal refusal for failing to submit to a blood test issued through a warrant. Moving on to 23 VSA 1205, starting on page 96 of today's calendar, concerns the civil license suspension procedure related to DUI charges in Vermont. H44 resolves a fascinating unintentional gap in the law between 1201 and 1205. Section 1201 creates the criminal offense if someone possesses a blood alcohol content, or BAC, at or above 0.08. However, Section 1205 creates a civil violation if a person possesses a BAC only over 0.08. H44 amends 1205 so that it is consistent with 1201 by reading that the violation occurs at or above the legal limit. On page 97 of the calendar, 1205C is amended to ensure that the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles receives the police officer's affidavit of probable cause when someone is provided a notice of violation. This ensures that the DMV has the information necessary to suspend someone's license if adjudicated accordingly. Next, as I mentioned previously, provisions related to DUI penalties involving serious bodily injury in 23 VSA 2010 are also amended. These amendments can be found starting at the bottom of page 99 of today's calendar. These amendments ensure that separate DUI violation can be charged for each person who dies and each person who is seriously injured in the same DUI-related crash. Previously, the statute restricted such enhancements to crashes that only resulted in death or crashes that only resulted in serious bodily injury, not both. This led to unnecessary restrictions for prosecutors when they charged. H44 seeks to amend that. Sections 3 and 4 of the bill, Madam Speaker, starting on page 101 of the calendar, amend 33 VSA 5202 and 5229 to ensure that the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles receives any merits adjudication orders concerning the potential license suspensions of someone in a family court proceeding. This is one of the reporting loophole closing measures in H44 that I've mentioned before. Section 5 of the bill creates the Impaired Driving Processing Task Force. The task force is created to study the concept of implied consent during a DUI investigation, with the goal to recommend constitutional approaches to both minimize the length of a law enforcement encounter for a suspect and to minimize the processing and paperwork requirements for the law enforcement officer. The task force is composed of the Chief Judge of the Superior Court, the Commissioner of Public Safety and Motor Vehicles, the Defender General, the Director of the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs, and a representative from the Vermont Police Association. A report in a form of proposed legislation is due to the House and Senate Committees on Judiciary by November 15th of 2025. And finally, Madam Speaker, Section 6 of the bill states that the bill goes into effect on July 1st of this year. We heard from the following witnesses: the Director of Enforcement and Safety from the Department of Motor Vehicles, Legislative Counsel from the Office of Legislative Counsel, the Deputy Defender General and Chief Juvenile Defender, the Traffic Resource Prosecutor from the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs, and the Chief Superior Judge from the Vermont Judiciary. All of these witnesses, Madam Speaker, were in favor of the clarifications that H44 provides. The committee vote was 11-0-0, and we ask for your support.
And now speaking for the Committee on Appropriations, member from Underhill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. H44 was referred to the Appropriations Committee because a new task force is established. Our committee determined that any financial impact would be de minimis. As a result of our discussion of H44, House Appropriations also offers one instance of amendment in Section 5. The amendment can be found on page 103 of today's calendar. In the one instance of amendment, subsection B of Section 5 is struck and new language inserted. Section 5 in part establishes a task force, and subsection B defines the membership of the task force. The Appropriations Committee added one additional member to the task force in B sub 6, the President of the Vermont Sheriff's Association or designee. The House Committee on Appropriations favorably recommends H44 as amended by the House Judiciary Committee and further amended by the House Committee on Appropriations on a vote of 11-0-0. We ask for the body's support. Thank you.
The first question is on the report of the Committee on Appropriations. The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Judiciary be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Member from South Burlington.
Madam Speaker, the Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee heard the recommendation from the Appropriations Committee and found it favorable on a straw poll of 10-0-1.
Member from Brattleboro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Your committee on House Judiciary took a straw poll on the amendment this morning at a vote of 10-0-1, and we support it.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Judiciary be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended the report of the Committee on Judiciary. Now the question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Judiciary as amended? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended the bill. Now the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and third reading is ordered. Members, that completes the orders of the day. The chair has one announcement. The following members are appointed To the Vermont Citizens Advisory Committee on Lake Champlain's Future, the member from Burlington, Representative Odie, and the member from Georgia, Representative Brannigan. Are there any further announcements? Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, political science, that which we practice in this chamber on a daily basis, is at its core a science. Like any discipline, it follows a method. We ask the questions, we gather the evidence, and we make informed decisions. This process also requires that we continue asking the questions and remain open to new information as it emerges. I'd like to remind the body that tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. we will welcome members from the Abenaki-Odanak First Nation, along with researchers and historians from the University of Ottawa and the University of Vermont, and I ask this body to please consider attending tomorrow's workshop with that spirit of continued inquiry in mind. I have asked the Sergeant-at-Arms to block a section of chairs for legislators and our guests from the Odanak First Nation. We do anticipate that the room is going to fill fairly quickly, so we'll reassign those seats if they remain empty. I would love to see you all there. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements? Member from Wolcott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Older Vermonters Caucus will meet tomorrow at noon. However, I'm not really sure where because the member from Montpelier said that the Workers Caucus was in room 10. So I will send out an email with the location, but we were meeting at noon tomorrow and we'll have an update on the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements? Member from Colchester.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would just like to welcome back the minority leader and let her know how much she was missed.
Welcome back. Are there any further announcements? Member from Georgia.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the building we work in is a beauty, isn't it? It takes my mind off the work that we do oftentimes when I walk through here. It's a beautiful place, and we have beautiful paintings all over the State House. Our members should take time to study them. They are a history lesson in themselves. I want to draw members' attention to the large painting downstairs in the entryway by the Sergeant-at-Arms office. It's the painting of the USS Maine. It's harbored or anchored in the harbor in Havana, Cuba, and shows several American sailors on board. Here in Vermont, sorry, I lost my place here. It's a picture of American sailors on the USS Maine in the harbor in Havana. The Spanish-American War began with the mysterious explosion of the U.S. battleship Maine. Here in Vermont, we remember the Spanish-American War, otherwise known as the most boring war in U.S. history, because of Commodore George Dewey. He was born in Montpelier, 1836. He was a soldier in the Civil War and also in the Spanish-American War. The Maine had been sent to Cuba to protect the interest of American business, and soon there was a rebellion that began against Spanish rule. Much of Congress and a majority of the American public expressed little doubt that Spain was responsible for blowing up the Maine, and they all called for a declaration of war. This battleship was one of the first built as a battleship here in the United States. I think the cost was something like $2 million, a great deal of money back then. And to lose that battleship all at once in such a huge explosion was a big loss. Within 3 months, the United States had decisively defeated Spanish forces on land and sea there in the Caribbean. And in August, an armistice halted the fighting And in December, the Treaty of Paris was signed between the United States and Spain, officially ending the Spanish-American War and granting the United States possession of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. So there was a question for a long time, what caused this explosion on the battleship? People were convinced, of course, it was a mine, and the Spanish had done it to scare the Americans away. But in 1976, a team of American naval investigators concluded that the main explosion was very likely caused by a fire that had ignited the ammunition stocks, not by a Spanish mine or any act of sabotage at all. So, Madam Speaker, I want to remind us here as we do our work and sometimes are distracted by whatever, sometimes government makes mistakes. We need to be willing to admit that and go on and correct them. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements? Member from Swanton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In sharing in the love of the building that we work in, tomorrow there is a fundraiser for the Friends of the State House, where you'll be able to purchase Vermont House, Vermont Senate, or Vermont State House logoed merchandise, and a percentage of all the proceeds of the event run by the Sergeant at Arms in the cafeteria will go directly to the Friends of the State House. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements? Member from Essex Junction.
Madam Speaker, the Democratic Caucus will meet 15 minutes following adjournment in room 11, I promise.
Member from Pulteney.
Madam Speaker, House Republicans will meet 10 minutes after adjournment in room 10.
And member from Winooski.
Madam Speaker, today's House Progressive Caucus meeting has been canceled. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none. Member from Pulteney, can you please offer us a motion to adjourn until Wednesday, February 19th at 3 p.m.?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion this body stand in adjournment until Wednesday, February 19th, 2025 at 3 p.m.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The